Second big change is flexibility in pedagogy. How do you teach? And the best example of this is to think of a flipped classroom. This is one of the most famous courses at MIT. It's called 802, Electricity and Magnetism. It's taken by all students. Today we teach it with no lectures. The lectures are all captured in video by Walter Lewin, who's very well known for his dynamic lectures. When students come to class, we teach them in what we call a TEAL-style learning. Don't worry what TEAL means. It simply says when they come to class, they work in small groups solving a problem. The professor is there. He walks around. He answers questions. Every once in a while, he will stop and lecture for 5 minutes. But the students are working directly. They're getting immediate feedback, instant feedback. Did I understand this? If I did, I can keep solving the problem. If I didn't, now's the time to ask, rather than waiting until the lecture is over. And the last big change is what in English we would call competency-based assessment. Rather than waiting until the end of the term to see if a student can answer the questions on a final exam, we want to measure, we want to assess the ability of a student based on what it is they need to know. If a student can demonstrate they have mastered the material after 3 weeks, they should be able to pass out of the exam and move on to the next class. If they can't, they need to repeat it. But we think that competency-based experiences or evaluations are really going to strengthen the way in which, in fact, students can move through the curriculum in a much more flexible manner. The second major change is actually blending the online technologies with an on-campus experience. That quote is from a very famous person, me. All right, maybe not so famous. But it's a quote I use regularly because in MIT education, and I suspect this is true of Berkeley or of Tokyo Tech, is not just about what knowledge you learn. It's about all those other skills. We've already talked about how we do it in extracurricular activities, but we're doing the same thing in terms of blending our experience with students. So to give you a sense of that, today, out of 4,500 students, on average every day, 1,000 of them are using online tools to have part of their educational experience. Most of it comes from immediate feedback. A student listens to a lecture. They stop. They do a quick exercise to understand, did I understand those concepts or not? In about 30 courses, those lectures are a student watching in their dorm room, in their room. They're doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the time when they're awake, as opposed to 10 o'clock in the morning when only professors are awake. They are doing the listening to the lecture when they want and then coming to class to do the problem solving. And you can read, as you may have done here, the quote. It's not important that you understand the quote, but it gives you a sense from the students of how much they like this particular experience. As I already said, we have then changed one of our big classes, our introductory electrical engineering and computer science class. I said this earlier, that online assessment is incredibly important to students as they use this, but I wanted to show you that we're going to make a change. Right there. Starting next year, we will have no lectures. The lectures will all be captured in an online fashion. Students will listen to them before they come to the lab. And all of the interaction, all of the instruction with the faculty member is going to be in the actual lab. Now, some of you may be thinking, can you really do this with all kinds of material? And so I simply want to put up for you, this is a list of the departments in which we provide virtual or online lab experiences. It does not cover everything, but you can see it covers a very large range of different topics. And I was going to show you some examples, but I'm just going to skip by them in the interest of time to get to the last 2 points I want to make. But you can see the list by which, in fact, we think you can teach in an online fashion. If we make these changes, this leaves us with some interesting challenges. What does a classroom look like? I'm sorry, President Mishima, I've already suggested you're going to have to get rid of this hall. But we're not convinced that a classroom of the future needs to be a big lecture hall. We actually think a classroom of the future is much more likely to be a small space that can be easily changed, where students can gather in groups of 5, 10, 50, and interact with somebody. I know, as I heard today, your students do not live in dormitories, but for those of us who have campuses who do, what does a dormitory look like? Is it just a place where a student sleeps? Or does it have, in every dorm room, a small electronics shop? Or does it have in every dorm a small maker space where students come together and actually create and make different things? What do other learning spaces look like? Do we still need libraries? Or let me say that differently. Do we still need libraries as places to store books? Or should they be remade into maker spaces where students can come, gather, and build things, create things, build teams along the way, and make all of those changes? And so what I'd like to suggest to you is that MIT is dramatically changing both what we teach, how we teach it, where we teach it, and how we use it to turn students into global leaders. And I hope for the rest of today's session we'll get a chance to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your words with us. Grimson 先生、貴重なご講演を誠にありがとうございました。皆様もう一度拍手をお願いいたします。
A big round of applause once again, please, for Professor Grimson.